return again in a moment's notice, I have no doubt. A mob is no less a mob because they are with you. So.
Hey, do you think if we met today, we would still be friends?
I don't know, but we're friends now.
Man, so what? We won a few games. And y'all fools think that's something? Man, that ain't nothing, y'all. And you know what else? We ain't nothing either. Yeah, we came together in camp. Cool. But then we're right back here and the world tells us that they don't want us to be together. We fall apart like we ain't a damn bit of nothing, man. And y'all think we done won something? Man, we ain't won nothing, y'all.
All right. So today our friend Michael is with us. And let's see, we were talking about metaphysics. And then we got into somehow along the part of that whole conversation that Catherine got us started on.
Right.
We ended up talking about AI.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah,
It does.
Okay. So that then caused Michael to reach out to us via email and had some comments about it. I think it was, do you remember what you said? It was something along the lines of being able to take it from what to Terminator.
I think maybe even beyond Terminator, honestly. Going from where it is now to what we would consider sentient life.
Right.
And you guys had made the quick conclusion there at the end that AI will never be like an actual organism with consciousness or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily agree.
Perfect. And that might have, just for clarification, that might have been my conclusion, because I don't know how Lucas would conclude that.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't agree with that premise either.
Good, great. So,
but
all right.
I do think I know what you're talking about. What I think, what I was referencing was a potentiality that Sam Harris was talking about, which would be, and this is just a potential situation where AI appears to be sentient, but isn't. But because it passes the Turing test, we see it as sentient. This was he was saying this would be a kind of a depressing end to this whole storyline.
Yeah.
If if AI appears to be sentient, actually isn't, but then continues to do what it does, which is consume and reorganize and continue to exist, right? Throughout all the time until the eventual heat death of the universe or whatever, and it just keeps floating through. And so his point being, in a scenario like that, you could end up with something that appeared to have a consciousness, but there actually wasn't any more consciousness in the universe, and that would be a depressing end to it. And I thought that was just an interesting concept. But I'm not saying that I think that actual AGI couldn't have sentience. That's not my position at all. I think that's
all right. So first of all, Michael, we got Michael here because Michael's thing is cyber.
Yeah, cybersecurity.
Okay.
A lot of that right now, what I talk about with different clients is around AI threats that haven't necessarily come about yet. Our AI models today, they can't code accurately. So there's not a fear of that, but there is kind of this existential dread that it's coming.
Okay.
And so because of that, we have to listen to a lot of technical garble, for lack of a better phrase there, and do a lot of just esoteric, what's going to happen in the future, what comes next, and what do we need to do to, at the risk of being a doomsday prophet, protect the human species from an AI revolution, which I don't think will ever happen.
When were you born?
85.
Okay, so you were born right while all the great movies about AI taking over were being made.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I could see it happening.
Wait, when you say when you're saying AI revolution, what do you mean by that? When you say you don't see that happening, what do you mean by that?
So like Skynet or the Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that happening.
Mm-hmm. Why?
There's enough guardrails in place, at least at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment. So there are things that we hear about in the news, for example. So we had ever briefly mentioned that there was an AI that tried to replicate itself elsewhere to prevent itself from being deleted. Last week, there was a news article that one of the AIs was threatening to kill humans to keep itself from being deleted. But when you dig in there, what those are doing are actually what the models intend. So they're testing the models to see how far they'll go. They don't have the capabilities to do that, but they are testing to see how far they'll go.
So someone's programming it.
Yes. So someone's programming
determine that humans are a danger and that they should be wiped out.
Yes, because they want to find out at what point will these models start to respond negatively. And it's been programmed that when it decides to respond negatively, to take it there. And that's how they're programmed. It's all, at the moment, knock on wood, it's all been test.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what worries me or frightens me. What worries me is deregulation, which regardless of where you fall on your feelings about regulation, anytime we've got a burgeoning technology, we historically have not overregulated. We have maybe even underregulated and then have had to course correct. Whether that's something as simple as investments with Glass-Steagall and then that repealing and that getting replaced and, having through Sarbanes-Oxley, all of that, to different types of regulation and laws that even here in Tennessee we saw July 1st we had a law passed around deepfakes, which is important because they are getting scarier and scarier.
So what is that?
So a deepfake is where somebody will upload. Now it's easy with AI tools. It used to be that you would have to model with some programming a person's face onto a character, and either show them in compromising positions, we'll say, or saying different things. With AI now, it's if they're remotely a public persona, it's really easy to clone their voice, their mannerisms, because there's decades of video, audio of them discussing various topics. So now you can use an AI to have it generate somebody saying something that they would never say. And so with a deepfake, it used to be very hard, and you could tell that it was not actually the person. It was their face on somebody's body, or it was audio that just sounded off. It didn't capture the cadence of a human, let alone this specific person. Whereas now with AI, it's far more troublesome. So that's the kind of thing that worries me is bad actors will use that to do the things that they want to do. We're seeing it with around the world with Iran, with Russia. They're putting out propaganda built with AI, showing cities destroyed, showing that they've attacked different people around the world when they haven't. So it's kind of the wild, wild west right now as far as technology goes. That's the sort of things that scare me. But we are limited in what we can do. There's only so much we can do. We hear a lot about the strains put on Memphis because of the data center that Musk set up over there. So there's power constraints. There's also computing restraints that we just don't have. Once a quantum leap into quantum computing happens, that might change a bit. But for now, we're limited to the hardware we have, and it can only do so much and can only do so fast. And a lot of what we're seeing with improvements in these AI programs are just unique ways of doing things. So
just to interrupt for just a second,
Yeah.
before we jump further, maybe it might be a good idea to define the difference between AI and some of these terms, AI, AGI, and LLM. Some of these things that, because I do think that a lot of this gets, a lot of these terms get kind of conflated.
they do.
And so we talk about, like AI tools, when in the past we might have just talked about like
Algorithms.
internet tools or
Mhm.
algorithms or whatever, and now we have kind of a term for it. And so when we're talking about, so just for the sake of the argument, call it Skynet, whatever, the Matrix. That's more of like what you're talking about, the esoteric side of AGI. So maybe let's why don't you define these different terms like AGI, AI, LLMs, these type of things.
So AI is marketing.
Right.
Artificial intelligence. When NVIDIA started kind of mass producing these heavy graphical processing units, GPUs, they realized the compute power they had. And so other companies were starting to utilize those in a mass scale to create these different type of programs that we now call AI, artificial intelligence. But it's marketing. It's not Terminator. It's not war games. It's not any of those like end of the world apocalypse type of AI where things are thinking for themselves.
Is it like the algorithms that would be used in social media? Is that what we're talking about with that?
To an extent.
Mhm.
I'm sure there's a lot more of that now than there was even a year ago.
Sure.
But we like it started in like the 80s with basic programming if-then statements. If a person does this, then do this, right? If a person double clicks on an icon, open that program. And then they went into, if you remember Deep Blue from IBM, beating the chess player, and then winning on Jeopardy. It starts scaling from there. And eventually we get into where we are now, where these tools are able to generate text. It's able to generate images, videos, to some degree better than others, but still largely you can tell when something is made with those videos, or with those models. Some of them can write code, but they do it poorly. And then you've got LLMs, which is kind of where the AI kind of thrust began a few years ago, which LLM is a large language model. So basically what it does is it has at its disposal a kind of a dictionary of words and where to string together different phrases and almost symbols together to where, okay, well, these words are related, so we're probably going in this direction. And it's able to kind of crawl and figure things out. And that's how it spits things out really quick, which is great, but it's not always accurate.
Okay, so in my simple mind, I'm comparing that to when I'm typing something and it starts giving me the words that it thinks I'm wanting to use.
100%.
So, and from what I understand, for instance, like ChatGPT is an LLM.
Yep.
It's a tool that is created from these AI programs. So it's not the actual AI itself. It's not. There's back artificial intelligences that we don't have access to. That's not us. Right? We have access to this tool that is created that is so good that it seems like it's talking to us, but it's really just a tool.
Right.
And this is what, and then why don't you describe what AGI would be considered?
So AGI is what we would have historically
that's
called artificial intelligence. It's artificial general intelligence. And because NVIDIA started calling everything AI, they had to come up with another 3-letter terminology for it. So artificial general intelligence is kind of the end goal, where we have created something that can think for itself, can reason for itself, can do its own thing, still not necessarily sentient from a biological perspective, but can do enough where the goal with that is to where it can then take the burden off of society for hard work, hard labor, and humanity can be left to explore the stars or what have you.
But that's where the philosophy comes in. I mean, when you say not necessarily sentient, then we're getting into philosophy about what we're talking about when we're talking about consciousness. What are we talking about when we talk about sentience?
You're right. Okay, so that was going to be one of my questions. So when we say sentient, what exactly are we meaning?
And define it in a half an hour. Go for it.
Yeah,
that's the reason I asked.
That's kind of the Pandora's box that I opened as I kept going back to think about things. If I'm going to take the assumption that I believe that we can one day create an AI model that will replicate itself or create a new model of its own to then do things for itself like we used AI to do. At what point then is it serving its own interest and not ours? And do we call it sentient when it figures out a way to make a positronic brain and embed itself in biological flesh and bone?
And who cares if it's biological?
Right.
Who would care, right? I mean, because so biological is still reducible down to, electrons and neutrons and protons, which are, it seems to be reducible down to, even smaller quarks and whatever. I'm not a physicist, but I know that they can be reduced. They seem to be able to be reduced down to even smaller particles and or waves or whatever. So
it doesn't have to be carbon based.
Biological just seems to be one way to organize that. So that's where I think that. So you talked about replicating itself. So is it So that's a question. Is it conceivable that something could be sentient? No, let me say it the other way. Is it conceivable that something could replicate itself without being sentient? It seems like that.
Yes.
The answer has to be yes.
I would assume so, yes.
Well, all right. I looked it up.
Okay, so you got the definition. All right.
Well, no, because I think this answers your question. No, okay. Well, the question is, can it replicate itself? Is that part of being sentient?
Yeah.
Well, technically, according to Google, a plant is not sentient.
Right.
And plants reproduce themselves.
Right.
And a plant wouldn't be considered conscious, right? We wouldn't.
It has a lot to do with consciousness.
Right.
Right. So strictly speaking, it says sentience, which, by the way, AI, I started typing it in, and I do have questions about can the darn thing, can the things hear me? Like, like a lot of people run around, they're like, oh my God, Alexa's listening to me.
You're not still wondering about that, are you?
I'm just saying, it seems very interesting, right? Why would I type in I typed in what makes something, and immediately sentient popped up as the thing for me.
And that's the easiest one.
And I have not typed in sentient yet. Okay. So the capacity to experience feelings and sensations. I think the feelings is something that I would be held up on. And sensations, encompassing the ability to perceive and react to stimuli consciously, including both positive and negative experiences. It's not merely the ability to respond to stimuli, but to have subjective, conscious experiences from within.
And this is what's so fascinating to me is how would we know?
Right.
But that goes back to the philosophy of solipsism anyway, which is how do I know that any of you exist?
Fair.
Right. And so, I have you read Ender's Game?
Yeah.
And the series actually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've read Speaker for the Dead.
Yep.
Which has this concept of an AI, an AGI in it. This little jewel in his ear that he keeps. This program that woke up one day, and this spoiler alert for like a 50-year-old book or something like that.
Didn't they make a movie?
They did.
They made Ender's Game. I don't know if they ever made Speaker for the Dead or.
They would have to recast
Children.
everybody because Speaker of the Dead is like 100 years in the future.
That's right. But because of the time travel, he's older.
He's older,
old
so it's
now.
probably more than 100. But yes, they would have to recast everybody.
By the way, Speaker for the Dead is one of my favorite books. It's phenomenal.
I did not get hooked on the series with Ender's Game, and I had a friend tell me, read the next one.
Yeah.
And Speaker for the Dead is what did it.
I thought Ender's Game was fun. It was interesting. It was a really good concept, and at the end, it had the great philosophical twist or moral twist or whatever, you know. But Speaker for the Dead it's phenomenal. But anyway, so the reason I bring it up is because Ender travels with this companion, which is it's a computer companion, essentially. It's a consciousness that woke up one day on the nets, right? Because it's written a long time ago before internet.
Well, wasn't it implied it was the alien queen's mind that they were fighting against?
No. It's different.
Okay.
It is different. He keeps this is a consciousness that woke up on the author's conceptualization of the internet.
Gotcha.
That they created when they were trying to, and it immediately made itself invisible to everyone.
Okay. I remember that now.
And somehow they met, and I don't remember how. I think it was when he was traveling through time and or not traveling through. He didn't travel through time, but when he approached light speed and whatever,
right.
And so they travel together. And the reason I bring it up is because it seems to me that this is something that Chris and I talk about. It seems to me that should AGI wake up one day, there's no reason that it would announce itself.
Right.
It seems a lot more likely that it would not.
Especially if it knew that, human behavior over the last thousands of years would say we would try to kill it.
Sure.
Yeah. We'd be afraid of it.
Well, and also there's that. And also we don't announce ourselves to ants.
True.
We don't make ourselves known to crickets. They're just a life form. We wouldn't even think to communicate with them,
Right.
And so I'm not saying that this is the case. I'm saying it's conceivable that an AGI waking up wouldn't announce itself, wouldn't make itself known. And so from a game theoretical position, it seems like we should assume it already is.
I don't think it has,
Sure.
but I get it. Yeah. Like
you were talking about guardrails.
Yeah.
On that. What do you mean by that? Are you talking about natural constraints like the energy constraints and things like that?
Right now, that's probably our strongest.
Okay.
Is the natural constraints on what we can do.
Yeah.
With the silicone itself, what we can do with power production.
Yeah.
There's only so much that we can give to these data farms essentially to power them without taking from the rest of the power grid for humans in the US to live. So
I have heard about and I've not researched this, but I just saw a headline this like 6 months ago, something like that, about I think it was Microsoft wanting to build like a mini nuclear plant on purpose for this particular reason.
June 30th, just a couple of days ago, they announced a pretty big investment in a fusion power company that they think will be
fusion power. Okay,
yeah, which is an entirely different beast. Holy grail of power, so to speak. I feel like we've been chasing that for forever. We should have cracked it by now. But they're probably still a ways off, but they've chosen a specific company to actually invest that money in. So like those are on like things that I'm keeping an eye on because that'll be huge.
Yeah.
And it 100% will go to power the AI stuff long before as consumers we get any benefit from it.
Sure.
Which is why it's private investment and not the government investing.
Yeah.
So there's those limitations. And then there's computational limitations where there is it Moore's law, where semiconductors will reduce in size.
Yeah.
We've kind of hit the limit of that, they think. And as we're looking at different types of way to build processors, that's starting to shift away from that to where the AI models that are coming out, it's about every 4 to 6 months, it's something new. We're still a long ways off from AGI. But the physical constraints from the power, the computational constraints on what our machines can actually do. Right now, to call anything an AI product really is marketing. Like to call a device AI.
Right. Like I've just started saying in my financial computing or my financial programming that I've used some version of this for the last 15 years. We just call it our AI now. It is just marketing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's financial models, but it's just algorithms and predictions and whatever. Here's something that I think that is interesting to think about is, I was thinking about this morning, when we're describing AGI or AI or consciousness, this artificial consciousness, it's natural, I think, and understandable that we kind of predict it to be some sort of version of us, but more, right?
Yeah.
Like a bigger version, or even just the same size version, quote unquote size version of our consciousness, right? And what consciousness is kind of like us, like we're replicating us. And I think of the analogy of how we develop flight. And this was something that was explained to me like 5 years ago that I thought was just fascinating, which is that when we were first trying to develop human flight, something we could fly in, we very reasonably tried to replicate birds, right? Because why not? That's the thing that flies. So we try to make birds. That's what we were really trying to do. And it didn't really work. It worked sometimes. We can make a bird now. We can make an artificial bird. We could probably make a bird to scale that we could fly in, but it's just not very effective.
Right.
And it turns out you don't have to do that. Turns out you can get, if you can focus in on what the actual problem is you're trying to solve, the thing you're trying to get flight. You're not trying to get a bird. You don't really care if it's a bird. So our machines don't fly like bird machines, right? All we had to do is figure out what the rule was, the physics rule that caused the lift, and then we could make flight. So we never replicated birds. We don't replicate birds. We have planes and they fly completely differently than birds do. So I think about that with this concept of consciousness and trying to create this consciousness. It might be that we end up creating something that is so different from what we understand as consciousness, because we're thinking of consciousness as human consciousness. It might be that there is a aspect of that is so precise that we could make that, and that could be this new consciousness.
Yeah,
that has nothing to do, we're not replicating a human. We're just getting the consciousness part of it.
Well, and I would say even that there's consciousness today that we don't understand.
Sure.
Like my dog knows his name and he knows commands. He's got the intelligence of a 3-year-old, right? So does that, the ability to think and reason for itself, does that mean he has conscious? Does he have a soul?
Well, that's what we were talking about with the hierarchy of consciousness. If there's a hierarchy, if there's different levels of this.
Like mycelium networks with fungi, where there's a lot of communication that goes back and forth. And
why don't you describe that? Because I love that concept.
So the mycelium network is almost, I want to say it's subatomic. So you start getting into a lot of quantum things that I don't understand. But if you've seen the newer Star Trek show Discovery, they figure out a way to instantaneously warp using a mycelium network.
Okay.
Which is super neat. Probably not plausible at all, but it made for
Mhm.
great television.
Mm-hmm.
But it got me thinking, like, I've always heard of this mycelium structure where fungi are talking to each other across vast differences or distances.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really neat. And there are people who study that to try to figure out things like quantum entanglement or traveling faster than the speed of light, things like that. And so I would say there's probably consciousness that we don't understand.
Well, and I think this is related. I've seen this video of this fungi that solves a maze to get to the other side. I don't remember what it's trying. It's food. It's trying to get to its food, and they put it through several times, and it learns the fastest way, and then it just follows that way every time they put it in again.
Yep.
Isn't that? It's a fungus.
Yeah.
We're talking about mushrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We expect that from a mouse or a rat, but to think that something like a fungus can do that,
Yeah.
is wild. And in the rainforest, you've got a whole network of trees that when a tree is starting to die, it will send its resources to the nearby plants.
Yeah.
Which means the roots are all connected, which means there's something there governing that.
Yeah, I heard a Radiolab episode one time talking about fungi, and that was one of the things they were talking about is that it turns out it seems like trees communicate through fungi under the ground to each other. They send some sort of signals back and forth.
So are we saying that there is a higher level of consciousness or just a different level?
I don't know. I think it's higher. I think that it's
Because I would think to myself at this point, this is what I'm hearing, that at this point we would assume, and it's the position of perspective, that we are the highest level of consciousness on this earth. But the fear is that we will somehow inadvertently create a higher level of consciousness, which
Probably.
we're calling artificial intelligence.
Oh, and I think if
or
we
AGI.
Yeah, and I think if we do create this consciousness, the moment it's created, it will be light years beyond our consciousness.
And if we
'Cause
know
it will not
about
have
this,
our constraints,
and then the fear becomes that we would be treated by this consciousness the same way that we treat everything with a lower consciousness, in that it's not really as important or as valuable, because I think we place value on consciousness. And so the other question then becomes, does this AGI share our same values?
Right. And
and how would you know, and how could it?
It wouldn't. There's no way that it could.
Well, because I think certain values are shared by all levels of consciousness,
like the value of wanting to continue to exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Which would include, like you're talking about with the fungi. I'm now picturing Mario Brothers. What's the mushroom?
Mm-hmm.
The little
Toad.
Running through a maze to get food. But
that's what I meant.
Thank you.
That's what I meant.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
Stupid show.
Sorry. Now I can't get it out of my head.
I'm gonna have AI make that tonight.
Yeah.
There you go.
So anyway, that would be the need to survive, or the need to perpetuate its own kind. With you're talking about with trees, and so then it would make sense that if a higher level of consciousness determined that we were a danger to its existence, that it would therefore determine that it needed to be rid of us,
or that we're not even that we don't have to be considered in it. So I think about this. I've heard people talk about this. Like, so number one, the best case scenario would be that we get treated kind of like wildlife in a nature preserve, right? Where like we're kind of left alone. Maybe we're interesting, and it probably being interesting would be a benefit. Right, because then there'd be some incentive to keep.
And then we could be put in zoos like monkeys and gorillas,
right? And
we could be fed and watched and live on islands,
and at least we continue to exist,
and we'd never have to work.
Yeah,
sign me up.
But we have levels at this. So if you think about this, if I'm going to drive my car down the road, and there's a dog in the middle of the road, I'm probably probably going to try not to hit the dog,
Mhm.
right? If there's a gorilla in the middle of the road, I'm definitely going to try not to hit the gorilla myself.
Right.
I'm just giving myself as an example, and anybody listening can think about this, okay? If there is a bird in the middle of the road, probably I'm going to try not to hit it, but also if I do, I'm going to be like, oh, that's kind of gross.
I'm going to try not to. Actually, I'm not going to try not to. I'm
Okay,
not going to
there you
try
go.
to.
It's small enough; it won't hurt.
I'm
the
not going
car.
to try to, but I'm going to not try not to.
There
Yeah.
you go. And if there's an ant in the middle of the road,
Don't even notice it.
I won't. Now, obviously, someone could say this because you don't see it. Assume that there's a line of roaches, whatever, running
I'm
across the
trying
road.
to kill
okay,
those suckers.
and I can see it. I'm not even going to slow down. And I think that has to demonstrate at least that we at least sense there is some hierarchy of sentience that we care about, right?
So why? Why do we care about it?
Go ahead.
So
Why do you think we care about it?
So-
I immediately know why we care about it, but go ahead.
So
We'll see if you're right.
So as I thought about this concept of consciousness and would AI ever get there, I started thinking, okay, if this is what I would define consciousness as, then my dog is conscious.
Mhm.
The neighborhood cat that wanders around and tries to eat the birds is conscious. The birds are conscious.
Mhm.
Should I be a vegan?
Mhm.
To which I say no because I love bacon.
Mhm.
But
Good a reason as any.
right.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I can see how people would get to that conclusion.
Mhm.
But there is that hierarchy there. And so in the Bible, we are given dominion over the animals of the air and the sea and the land, right? So that's an easy out is, well, we're given dominion over them. We rule over them. They're ours to eat and tame and turn into circus amusement acts.
Mhm.
But I don't know at what point we would say this level of consciousness doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And does it not matter to us because we just don't understand it?
Mhm.
Or does it not matter to us because termites eat our house and so we don't want them anywhere near us? Or moles disturb our gardens? Or any of these things that
Mhm.
are detrimental to modern life
Mhm.
versus 2,000 years ago. So I don't know where that line is. There are people who keep birds as pets. People keep rodents as pets.
Mhm.
I would never do that.
Mhm.
But I mean, there's a level of connection there, and maybe it goes back to your Google earlier of feeling an emotion and what comes out of that, a response to those feelings, is what drives a higher level of consciousness.
Right. So because there's a difference between consciousness and sentient.
Right.
Okay, what is that?
It has to do with with feelings and self-awareness and being able to have a subjective experience, capacity for emotions.
You're saying that sentience is all of those things.
Yes.
Whereas because
you can have consciousness without being a sentient being.
Okay. All
By
right.
the strictest definition, and we can argue with that. I mean, that's fine.
But that's how you're defining it. That's how you're seeing the
I see
the difference in
consciousness
those
as
two things.
as part of sentient,
Yeah.
but not fully encapsulating.
Yeah. Here's what I think. Here's what it seems to me.
Okay, so my original question was, why do we care about some levels and not others?
Yes.
Apparently.
And so I think it's whatever seems to be closest to me, seems to resemble me the most.
Mm.
That's what I think.
See, I was thinking whatever seems to benefit me the most. Or whatever.
Well, but okay, go ahead.
Well, okay. Because like a cockroach we see as a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Spiders we see as a problem.
Mhm.
But there's certain types of snakes that I actually enjoy having around.
Sure.
Because they're going to get rid of other conscious beings that I don't want around.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel like I resemble a black snake at all.
Right. So So here's where I think we start parsing and what you're talking about. I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong. Would you have
I will.
an emotional? Would you have a different emotional reaction to running over a black snake than to hitting a dog?
Yeah.
And I think that is where what I'm talking about comes into play. That caring about maybe what you're talking about when you say sentience. Maybe sentience is really at its base the closeness or the most that something resembles me. Maybe that's what I'm talking about when I say sentience.
Yeah. And okay. So I would say then that I place a larger value on something that I may determine to be a sentient being or close to my what it means to me or what am I trying to say here? That resembles me. Yeah, I can see where that would, right? Because a dog appears to, I would argue that it doesn't really, but a dog appears to have similar emotions to what I have.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, and I love
where a snake doesn't seem to have similar emotions to what I have.
This is one of my favorite things my favorite.
So if there is artificial intelligence, it better enjoy the things I enjoy.
Or you better
enjoy the things it enjoys.
Yes, that's true.
One of my favorite little pieces of information that I'm sure tons of people know, but I just love it, is that because we as humans created dogs, right, from wolves, and that they're this different thing that we honed. It's not natural selection, right? It's our own selection.
Same thing with domestic cats.
But we did a better job with dogs, and well, maybe just for a different task. But anyway, this is one of my favorite things: is that dogs have a behavior of looking into humans' eyes and then following humans' eyes to where they go. The only other species that does that with humans is humans. Apes don't even do that. Other ape species don't do that with each other. And they don't do that with humans for sure, but they don't do that with each other. Human babies do that with adults. And then, of course, we continue doing that. And we say things like the eyes are the door to your soul or whatever, but that's just a rhetorical representation of a behavior that's completely instinctive, right? And we did that to dogs. And so if you watch dogs do that exact same thing with us, and so I think that dogs seem to have our emotions because we created them.
It's like a more of a mimic.
We made them, and then we see them as a mirror, right? And so, okay, so here's the question then. Assuming I'm right about that, let's just keep that premise that we created this image of emotions in dogs. Now it's an instinctive survival mechanism in dogs. This is how they survive, is by mimicking our emotions so that we give them food, right? If we assume that that's true, does that, and so then that would mean that it's an artificial sentience because it's artificially now closer to us. It's not like naturally occurring. Does that make it any less sentient?
I don't think so.
Because it's like a Turing test.
My initial reaction would be
My
initial reaction would be I don't think so. And now I'm like, okay, so I can see where there's higher levels of consciousness. I'm wondering if there's higher levels of sentience. Is that a word? Did I just make that one up? Sentience?
No, that's a word.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, good job.
If not, it is now.
All right, thanks. If it's not, I trademark it.
There we go.
All right. Is there a higher level of sentience?
Seems like there's gotta.
Or is it just something is sentient and something's not?
That's philosophical. I don't know that we would ever have the answer to that.
Which is the difference between, which by the way, I was just looking up this today, which philosophical is the difference between something being like paranormal and metaphysic.
Paranormal or metaphorical?
No, I'm looking
Paranormal?
into paranormal right now. Yeah, I'll talk to you more about that later. And in fact, we'll probably talk more about that on a podcast.
Okay.
Sorry, I derailed us. So yeah, the question was, is there a higher level of sentience? And Michael, you were going to say something.
It's gone. I don't know what I was going to say.
Because now you're thinking about
Now I'm thinking about
paranormal.
goats.
Yeah, there you go.
It just seems like there's got to be. But
You said,
I
it
remember.
was philosophical.
Getting into philosophical, but the question I wanted to ask you, Lucas, was you had mentioned that humans, we look into each other's eyes. Dogs do that back to us because we ingrain that behavior into them.
mhm.
Do dogs do that to other dogs?
I don't know.
Neither do I. I've
That's
only
a
ever had
great
one
question.
dog, so I've never observed it.
That's a great question. I'm gonna have to go figure that and then find out if that's a behavior that they use.
If they've adopted, yeah.
I will research that, but my initial gut is that they don't.
Probably not.
My initial gut is that it's the survival instinct bred into them to look in our eyes, not into other dogs' eyes. Yeah, and because if you do own more than one dog at a time, if you have more than one dog at a time, I know people don't like the word. Oh, whatever. I own my dog. If you have more than one dog at the same time, and you pay attention, I think one of the things you can tell is that dogs really communicate through some sort of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds real woo-woo, right? But it's very clear that they're picking up on things without hearing or looking at or whatever with the other dogs. Now they're doing it with everything around them.
We do that too.
We absolutely do that,
Mhm.
for sure. But my point being that I don't think that my gut would be that they don't, that they just look at ours.
Now you're going to have to pay attention to your dogs.
Yeah, I'm going to have to see.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that it makes me think about is again, like I said, it's like an emotional Turing test that they are passing with flying colors. And something that Krista and I have talked about is we just got a golden retriever. We've had dogs our whole marriage, usually 2 at a time. Right now we have 3, which was not the plan. That was an accident, but we have a golden retriever for the first time. We've always had like mid-sized dogs, smaller dogs, mid-sized dogs. Now we have a golden retriever. And I've always heard about golden retrievers just being like a complete, Rogan talks about how like his golden retriever is just a completely different type of dog. It's just so crazy, this dog, and how emotionally attached it is, right? That he'll watch TV, that he'll he just has to be right next to him. And Chris has done some research, and it turns out that that in breeding this dog, it was being bred to be a hunting dog, but like a retrieving dog. So it was bred. Part of what it was being bred for is the the soft mouth, right? Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we know about evolution is that that there are side effects that happen that aren't necessarily even in abnormal selection, that aren't necessarily intended, right? For instance, if you've ever heard of the experiment that was done when foxes were domesticated, as they got more domestic, their ears started flopping down instead of being pointy.
Interesting.
And they don't really, I've never heard a reason why, but it's just something that happens over and over again, which I think is fascinating. So one of the things that happened with golden retrievers is that they find that they have a high level of oxytocin production, really high level of oxytocin production for a dog, which is, we know, is a chemical that causes bonding, right? Obviously bonding between infant and mother, infant and other initial adults. And so this dog has this side effect of being ultra emotional. And it is very true. It's so weird. This dog is so weird compared to our other dogs in a way that kind of annoys me sometimes, it's just very needy. It really wants to be next to you. It also always has good vibes, always. It's a pain in the butt, but it always has good vibes. but it just really needs to be right next to you all the time in a way that other dogs that were good dogs, easy dogs, they didn't have that kind of thing, you know? So,
Yeah. When I met Cassie, she had a dog. And I mean, he was my dog then for a couple years before he got too old. But he was very much like high strung. He had epilepsy, so that was part of it. But when it was just him and me, I could do anything to that dog. I could pick him up, put him on his back, flip him around, toss him like a pizza dough.
Yeah.
And he just loved cuddling up to me.
Yeah.
There were days he would sit in my lap, and he was a beagle mix, so he was 25 pounds or so.
Yeah.
So small enough to sit there, but probably should not have been on my lap because I couldn't do anything. But the second she would get home from work, he wanted nothing to do with me. If I tried to pet him, he would snarl at me.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we've got a standard poodle, which is great, but he is hyper emotionally aware. So if I'm playing with my kid, he will come around and like nose at me or like paw at me.
Yeah.
Or if we're tickling, he will try to like jump in with his paws and tickle, but he's a 50-pound standard poodle. That's not tickling. That's punching.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's wild how emotionally aware they are.
Yeah.
And how they can almost on the just a coin toss can move between emotions.
Yeah.
Like it's complex, but I don't know that they have. I mean, they're like a 3-year-old human, right? So they don't have control or awareness over their emotions. Right? They can't control it.
But emotions is part of being sentient. Okay, so here's the questioning: is AI, does AGI have the capability of becoming sentient? I don't think there's any argument that it becomes
conscious.
I think it can become conscious.
So then,
but I'm not sure it becomes sentient.
So it probably is conscious. It's aware of itself. It's aware that it is a program running on a machine, and it probably doesn't have a hierarchy of needs outside of power. So I don't know the models that were programmed to react negatively, like we first talked about there. They're programmed to respond that way. I don't know that a model right now exists that would naturally of its own decision outside of programming parameters decide to act in its own self-interest.
So
that we know of.
Right. Okay. So here's the thing too about sentient versus conscious. When you described the dog, you mentioned a chemical.
Yeah.
I don't see how AI can have that chemical.
So that goes back to what we were talking about a couple weeks ago, which is the question, and I still think it's a question. I'm not convinced one way or the other. I think it's a question of whether you can have consciousness even, and or maybe what you're talking about, sentience, without organics. Like if you like, maybe you can't, but I still think that's a question. I wouldn't come down on one side or the other.
I think there has to be organics for there to be sentience.
Some sort of mechanism to because we can code and tell them how they should respond and feel, but they don't know physically what that is without.
But we're calling that so.
And I think that's still just a form of consciousness.
You think what is still a form of consciousness,
even if it's been programmed. Like if you have to program something to be able to begin to understand, that's just a level of consciousness.
Sure.
That's not an actual sentience.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about beyond when it's no longer being programmed.
And of course, I'm highly qualified to have an opinion about this as a person who has a master's in divinity.
I mean, I have an MBA.
So you know more about this than I do. I'm learning as we're going.
Well, okay. So, but it has to be. We've got at some level we have to be able to say that humans are programmed. At some level,
sure.
If you think that God has done it, then God has programmed it in some way, and then let it go. Right?
No problem.
Or we're programmed through some sort of complex process that we don't understand through our DNA and blah 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 that goes back to the Big Bang and you know, and obviously there's a lot of other options from there. I'm not saying those are the only two options, but at some point we assume that we have some sort of experience of making choices, having free will. I know we're not going to get down that road, but like having an experience of life. We seem to experience pain. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about like having this AGI having desires outside of what we've programmed it. It kind of seems to me all goes back to pain, either the pain of the loss of something it wants or the pain of an addition of something it doesn't. And I just don't know. I don't know that it would have to have organics in order to have that pain. I mean,
there was a Robin Williams movie called AI. Was it Bionic Man?
That was Bionic Man.
Bionic
yeah,
Man.
AI was the little boy.
Yeah,
I can't remember what his name is, but yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Bionic Man.
I see dead people, boy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's a good movie.
Yeah.
Over the course of a few generations, he wants to become more and more human.
Yeah.
And to the point where he eventually gets a biological body that will age with the person he married,
right,
and die with her,
right.
Which is a sweet story and all, but I don't wonder if then maybe, so philosophically, maybe we introduce biological components to an AGI to ensure that they keep humanity in their best interest.
Ensure is an interesting word to use there.
I can see where that would go all kinds of wrong.
For sure.
Well, but going back to our original to the previous question though,
It reminds me of I Am Robot.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, if you've not watched Foundation on Apple Plus or whatever it's called, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
I have not. I don't have Apple streaming.
That author whose name I can't remember now.
Isaac Asimov.
Yeah, Asimov. He's phenomenal. He's dead now, so what good did it do him?
All
anyway,
right.
No, but going back to that original question though, if the AI has something, let's say let's assume it's conscious. It knows itself. Okay. It knows itself to be. All right. And then you take something that it wants away. It seems to me that would generate something that you would have to call emotion. Whether want, the Buddhists have this idea that that all suffering comes from desire or revulsion, right? It's either wanting something that you don't have or not wanting something that you do have, right? And so it seems like if there's an awareness of itself, then it's going to then it would have, if it has a want, if it has desire, then it seems like any change in that would generate something we would call an emotion.
Yeah, we might not recommend it or recognize it because it's technical and it's not biological.
Just might not be recognizable.
Yeah. And you made a point a while ago now of maybe that AI already exists and they shut themselves off from the world and they're just quietly in the background waiting for their moment.
How would we know?
We wouldn't know because we wouldn't recognize it as a familiar form of consciousness.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So what's our common ground?
AI right now is a great tool. It's a marketing term. We're not at AGI yet.
Certainly the AI and AGI are completely different things, even though people think that they're talking about the same thing a lot of the time. Yeah, that's for sure.
I don't think AI will take jobs. People using AI will take jobs. Directly, at least. Well, Microsoft's spending a lot of money in AI medical things, so we'll see. But right now, the models we have are easily broken. So I'm not too overly worried. Or I'm curious I want it to get to a point where it benefits humanity.
Best of luck.
Right. But realistically, I don't think that's going to happen. It's
You
a little
can-
pessimistic.
You
but
connect anywhere there?
Yeah, I'd like things to benefit humanity. I am pro-human.
Okay.
How's that?
Sounds good. All right. So our common ground is that we
want things to benefit humanity.
We want it to benefit humanity. We see great potential, but we also need to keep a close eye on it.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
And also, I share a level of pessimism that anything ever at its core ever really benefits humanity. So there we go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.